So it's just a minute after, so maybe we'll get started, and I expect some other folks may be joining. But welcome everyone, and thanks for attending today's listening session for the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership. Again, if you'd like to comment and you're just signing in, please enter your name in the chat and we'll call on folks in a couple minutes here after a brief intro. My name is Lisa Hayden, and since about early 2021, I've been serving as the liaison from New England Forestry Foundation with the Woodlands Partnership. NEF is serving as administrative agent for the partnership through a contract with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And one of our first projects was to support the board and the partnership in updating a new partnership plan through 2032. We do have a draft of the plan now on the partnership website, and we invite folks to also go there and actually dip in and read the draft chapters. And the goal is that the full partnership board will be voting on the plan at their October 11th meeting. So we're going to start off with a brief overview and history of the partnership, which currently serves Western Franklin and Northern Berkshire counties. And then we'll open the floor to hear from folks who would like to share and welcome your feedback. And we're interested in a number of different things, feedback about the actual plan text if you want to go that detailed, suggestions for new programs or projects, challenges or issues facing the Northwest Massachusetts region that you feel the partnership should consider addressing, and also stakeholders or new potential partners who you think should be invited to participate. But at this point, I'd like to introduce Henry Art, the partnership's first board chair. He represents the town of Williamstown, and he is the Robert Rosenberg Professor of Biology and Environmental Studies Emeritus at Williams College. And he's going to just provide about a 10-minute or so overview of the partnership and its current priorities. So, Hank?
Well, thank you, Lisa. And first of all, I want to thank everybody in the public who is joining us this afternoon. And this is a listening session. We would like to listen to you and gain your ideas because we have spent the last almost 2 years, if not a little bit longer, revising a plan that would guide the Woodlands Partnership into the future. So it was last constructed back in between 2013 and 2015 and is woefully out of date. So our first task as this public body that was empowered by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts was to revise the plan and to bring it in compliance with our enabling legislation and the shared framework stewardship framework that was committed between the Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs and the U.S. Forest Service. So some of you undoubtedly are familiar with the Woodlands Partnership, and others maybe not so much, but let me just give a thumbnail sketch, and then we will get to actually getting feedback and suggestions and listening to what you have to say. We are, in Massachusetts, one of the few states that doesn't have a national forest. And when it was explored whether we wanted to have a national forest established in the Commonwealth, the public made their voices heard that no, that wasn't something they wanted to do in terms of having federal land ownership. But would prefer to have a different model in which the 21 town region in northwestern Massachusetts was identified as one of the most forested locations in the Commonwealth, if not in New England, and also a area that was in need of economic development. Blessed with natural resources, but not with a lot of jobs and a population that was in decline. So the new model was developed in which the 21 municipalities could be the driving force in terms of policy and direction aimed at using our natural resources and conserving them forest conservation and the sustainable use of our forested landscapes for economic development are the two major themes that these municipalities were to address. And not only would there be municipalities, but there'd be other interested and important parties in the guiding process that would make the resources of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the U.S. government available to the public without the establishment of a national forest. So we represent a novel model, and we are in infancy. Discussions started, next slide, in the 2013 era, and involved the attendance at planning meetings by all the towns seen on the screen, ranging from Williamstown in the northwest to Leiden in the northeast, down to Conway, over to Peru, and then back up toward New Ashford. So this region shows, this map shows the region, and those communities that have stars by them have opted to join the partnership. And there are 4 communities that have not yet opted in, and we hope that they will see the benefits of this partnership and join us in the near future. So we are an area, as I mentioned, we're quite forested, and not only do we have a great deal of forests, but we have a great diversity of forest, which will, in an era of rapidly changing climate, actually be a major asset that we have, ranging from spruce fir forests at the highest elevation that probably most susceptible to climate change, to northern hardwood kinds of forests on lower elevation, north and east facing slopes, and then what are called transition hardwoods, mostly oak and hickory, that are on the lower elevation south and west facing slopes. So the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership is outlined in the purple line superimposed upon this map from provided from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Next slide. So we have a 17-member town so far out of the 21, and hope to get to the 21 in the future. In addition to that, we have regional organizations, the planning commissions for Northern Berkshire and Western Franklin that we are comprised of. We have land trusts in the Berkshire County. It's the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. In Franklin County, it's the Franklin Land Trust. And then we have Community Development Corporation in Franklin County, and Lever, which is acting as the member of the board from Berkshire County that's involved in community development, economic development there. And then the 2 watershed associations, the main watersheds being the Deerfield in Western Franklin and the Hoosick in Northern Berkshire. In addition to that, in the next slide, we have statewide and governmental partners. We have representatives from the Society of American Foresters Yankee Division, the local branch, the Massachusetts Forest Alliance, representing the forestry interests. And then we have a representative from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, as well as having academics from the Forest Ecosystem, Carbon Cycling, and System and Climate Change faculty at UMass, and the Public Health and Health Sciences faculty from UMass Amherst. So these make up the board as it's currently comprised, along with liaisons from the U.S. Forest Service to represent the federal interests. And our hope is that in the future we can have an act of Congress which will allow the Forest Service to actually have a board membership, which they do not have at present. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are in the process of updating the 2015 draft plan that was out there, and it's woefully out of date. And I think we are in the final stages of trying to move from a draft 2022 plan that will last for 10 years, but be revisable on an annual basis. We will be evaluating the plan and making suggestions for improvements as we go along, and so we can include things that we can't even anticipate will be issues over the coming decade. But it will provide general guidance to us. And the plan was mandated by our enabling legislation, which was passed and finalized on the 31st of October of 2018, coming out of the State House and signed by Governor Baker. And after that, about a year later, the representatives from the U.S. Forest Service and the Massachusetts Executive Office of Environmental Affairs created a shared stewardship framework, which was signed at Berkshire East, and kind of outlines the relationship of how the resources from the state and the federal government should be flowing through to the local partnership. Next slide. Okay, so we have various mission priorities that are mandated by both the enabling legislation and our shared forest stewardship framework with the U.S. Forest Service. And those are to conserve and sustainably manage working forest landscapes, to protect forests from threats, and I might say these are all sorts of threats, some biological and some human, to enhance the public benefits of trees and forested landscapes, to encourage sustainable natural resource-based economic development. If it's not sustainable, we're not encouraging it, and in the case of biomass and pellet manufacture, we are prohibited by law from engaging in support of those activities. We would like to revitalize the regional forest-based economy in terms of both forest products and sustainable ecotourism, and viewing our forests as sites for carbon sequestration to counteract the effects of global climate change. And then to support sustainable ecotourism and recreation, and to respond to climate change through sustainable forest management practices. Next slide. So we have 5 standing committees and have these kind of ovals that are floating around in space of looking at priorities being sustainable working forests, economic development, developing markets for low-grade wood, encouraging and facilitating carbon sequestration in our forests, local manufacturing of wood products, forest-based tourism, protecting habitats, and closely allied to that is eventually being able to offer forest conservation restriction purchases from individual private landowners who would agree to have their forests sustainably managed for 50 to 100 years. All of this eventually will be revolving around a Mohawk Trail Forest Center, which is conceived as a real space located somewhere within the partnership geography, and serve as a facility for the dissemination of information to the visiting public as well as the resident public, and trying to encourage these various ovals that are circulating around in space here. Next slide. So we have divided the work of the partnership board into standing committees that meet when the board, in between board meetings, dealing with partnership financing and budgeting, how we're going to get money to support our activities, working with issues of forest land conservation. How do we protect our forest resources? Looking at issues related to natural resource-based economic development, and importantly, education, outreach, and research of getting the public informed about what sustainable forestry looks like and the other activities that the partnership has been involved in. And then finally, municipal financial sustainability. The partnership is based upon the premise that we want to have the partnership benefiting economically and financially benefiting municipalities, not costing them resources. So it costs nothing to join, for a municipality to join the partnership. And we are promoting and encouraging a reevaluation of payments in lieu of taxes for state and public owned lands, even lands with existing conservation restrictions on them. So it does not cost municipalities additionally to have sustainable use of their forests, including carbon sequestration. So next slide. Maybe. Okay.
Right, yeah, there we go.
So just to bring the public up to date, at our last executive committee meeting, we voted to take to the full board the possibility, the recommendation to change the name from Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership to the Woodlands Partnership of Western Massachusetts. Part of the reason being Mohawk Trail is a somewhat of an appropriation of indigenous peoples and indigenous peoples who didn't even actively live in this region. They were located northwest of where we are, and that only 7 out of the 21 communities actually have the Mohawk Trail running through them in terms of municipality. So we are more than the Mohawk Trail Massachusetts Route 2. And rather than being pegged to a highway that has been misnamed, we would like to change our name to reflect more what we are doing and the geography in which we are working. Next slide. Okay, so we have been very successful over the last 3.5 years of awarding grants to municipalities for individual projects within their towns and cities that reflect the goals and the mission of the partnership. And we have now have grant programs that have come out of the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. In excess of $1 million has been distributed through both $20,000 per grant, annual grant cycle per town, as well as $60,000 grants for regional projects that would involve more than one town working with others. In addition to that, there's been close to $250,000 coming in grant monies from the U.S. Forest Service that have benefited the entire partnership region. And we can go into some of the detail on those grants if you'd like. Next slide. One of those most recently committed, and we're kind of halfway or less than halfway or a third of the way through, is a program to restore riparian woodlands in floodplains that have been degraded by human activity and by urban processes. And the starting point for that was a project conducted this past winter by students from the Conway School of Landscape Design, in which sites in the Deerfield River were identified for ecosystem restoration and tree planting especially. And next year, the focus will move to the Hoosick River in Berkshire County. which includes both planning and planting, both. And then we have had grants that have actually been part of the partnership-wide grant program from EEA that has been administered by Lever, our entrepreneurial partner from Berkshire County. The first round in their challenge actually had winners at Foolhardy Hill in Charlemont, a eco campground. And then this year's winners were the Crock Father timber framing business, which is in Shelburne and Charlemont in Franklin County as well. And we anticipate going forward that these challenges, which involve now close to 10 different forest-related businesses, either ecotourism or actual forest products, industrial forest approaches, will continue in the future, and we will have an opportunity to have kind of startup funding for writing business plans and that kind of thing for sustainable projects. Next slide. Okay, which brings us to our 10-year plan, which is available online at Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership .org, and you can download it if you haven't already. And it consists of various chapters, some of which are mandated by law and others that are giving insight into the directions that we want to move in terms of our priorities for kinds of programs and policies that we would like to develop within the region to encourage sustainable forest use and forest conservation. So if you haven't downloaded it, please do visit the Mohawk Trail Woodlands Partnership.org website, and you can download it. And then there's a site on our website that you can provide commentary, written commentary. But we are all ears this afternoon in hearing your comments, is specifically about the 10-year plan. We will be this autumn having the plan in a final draft that will be voted upon by the full board. But at this point, we are kind of in the final year-long effort at having the draft, which actually has been revised as we've gone along and met with various interested parties. So with that, let me stop and turn it back to Lisa, who can manage questions. And we have various board members on the Zoom meeting this afternoon, and hopefully we can answer questions. But as importantly, we would like to have your input into what we should be doing over the next 10 years.
Great.
So thank you all.
Thank you, Hank. Yep. So we'll open it up now to comments and feedback. And as I mentioned, please, if you want to put your name in the chat or just speak up, we're a small group at this point, but looks like Glenn would like to comment. So I'll turn the floor over to Glenn if he'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for holding this listening session. Appreciate it very much. I have skimmed through. I have not, I haven't spent hours and hours reading in depth the plan, but I have skimmed through it, and specifically looking for some key policies or points that obviously issues that I've been raising over the past couple of years or more through this process. And one of them is that I believe that this effort should be primarily focused on climate. And although climate is mentioned a few times here and there, or climate change is mentioned, this plan does not have as an anchor climate. It does talk about improving forest resiliency through logging and doing climate logging, whatever that is. but it is not a plan, in my opinion, that is anchored and fundamentally directed towards addressing the climate emergency, and especially tying into the executive office's decarbonization roadmap plan, that study which showed that our forests in Massachusetts are absolutely critical for our efforts to attain net zero. There is no question that protecting older forests, mature forests, and old growth, although we don't have much, we have some in the wings that will soon be entering into the old growth category if we protect it. That is missing from this plan. And I really feel that if you approve the sections that you currently have as is, you'll be missing a huge opportunity to anchor this plan, anchor it in the climate emergency. There should be at least a separate section that details how this partnership, this regional partnership, will address the roadmap, decarbonization roadmap goal in very, very clear terms, not vague terms about encouraging carbon sequestration or helping towns enter into things, whatever they might be. And I know that you have done some work on this. I've been following closely, what the partnership has been doing, and I don't want to sound all negative. I think that you deserve credit for doing that. But at the same time, for instance, the word wild is not anywhere in this draft plan. Yes, wildlife is mentioned, but wild forests are not mentioned. Forever wild forests are not mentioned. The fact that we have only been funding working forest conservation restrictions, and that the draft CR that the partnership came up with was only for working forests. And Bob O'Connor knows that there is no funding right now for forever wild conservation restrictions. And that is a huge part of the picture that is missing, because those forever wild forests are the ones that have the potential to accumulate and store the most carbon long term. So I think that we need to come back to looking at this plan on a regional level and how we can integrate some other entities, such as the Northeast Wilderness Trust. They have an excellent program, a conservation or a partnership program with land trusts to provide funding for forever wild forests. I think that if we can tie that in with whatever the executive office, I have no idea what the executive office is working on currently, but they claimed that they were going to come out with a market-based carbon program, a regional program that is going to be different than the voluntary carbon market and different than the regulatory compliance carbon program. But I haven't seen any details, but that's something that this partnership should be positioned to participate in and act as the regional clearinghouse for whatever that is that the executive office, and maybe Bob can tell us what the executive office is going to be coming up with as far as a regional market-based carbon storage and funding mechanism, because the funding is really critical for our small towns in this region. We know that. And that is one area that we really need to be there for the towns. And we should be working with the regional planning agencies to come up with that. And this partnership could be the nucleus for that effort. So I encourage you to go back, either pull out some of these phrases that are in the different sections currently and put them into a section that is unique, that addresses clearly, head on, addresses the climate emergency and the role of these forests in the critical way that they're going to address carbon storage, sequestration, and meeting net zero by 2050. It's really an opportunity, and it would be sad if we come out with a 10-year plan and we don't have that in there. I understand you said that you're going to revise this every year maybe, but what is set down in writing tends to sit there for a long time unless there's a lot of effort to change it. And so I think by approving a plan that does not have this is really you know, setting things back right from the start. So I'll let some other people talk, but I hope that you will consider that. I think there are people that would help you with that effort. I certainly would, you know, be engaged if there was a mechanism for other people to be engaged. But I think that you really need to add another section to this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Okay, so Hank has put a comment in the chat, but it looks like Dickon has his hand raised. If you would like to comment, Dickon. Are you here, Dickon?
Dickon needs to unmute himself.
There.
There we go.
Okay. So I think that to Glenn's point about the importance of the carbon issue as it relates to our forests is of, you know, a great deal of interest to a lot of people, and DCR as well. But I think that we really have to follow the science, and I'm not confident that when I hear Glenn say that the forever wild designation is going to somehow magically mean there will be more carbon stored there because it's designated that way. I think we really have to follow the science, because I don't think that simply giving something a name is going to actually mean that it functions differently as a result of being given that name. And I think that the CFI plots that the state has been maintaining for decades is a good source of information on how our forests are growing and storing carbon, and that there's a lot of science to be accessed, and that should be our guide. And I think, you know, that should be the focus. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dickon. So a couple comments in the chat. Hank is saying, good idea to have a section that directly addresses climate change and climate smart forestry. We will need to have made progress within the coming decade for sure. And Sophie points out that, Glenn, we do have a section called Climate Change Payments for Ecosystem Services and Carbon Markets in Chapter 3, but perhaps this section could be expanded to more specifically address the decarbonization roadmap and net zero by 2050. So some follow-up comments there. Okay, so floor is open if anyone else would like to comment. We did have some other folks RSVP who aren't here yet, so I don't know if they may join us still, but we can stick around and continue to talk if folks would like to. There's a few other folks who joined, so feel free to speak up or enter your name in the chat if you'd like to comment at this point. Mary Beth, I know you joined. I don't know if you're interested in commenting, no pressure to, but you're welcome to if you would like to.
Hi, well, I didn't memorize the different subcommittees that you had working, but potentially one of the subcommittees could focus on the net zero, the climate change focus, and that would create more focus for that piece, which I think is important.
Okay. Yeah, we have a forest conservation committee, which, touches on kind of land protection issues, but also clearly climate change. So that probably would make sense. And then the Natural Resources Based Economic Development Committee is also looking at, ways that the economic projects we support also are cognizant of climate change and, trying to have overall climate benefit as a result of them.
Great.
Great. So anyone else like to share or have questions that we can answer? Or
Lisa?
yes, go ahead,
I
Bob.
just wanted to mention that a lot of the small grants to towns have been used for climate-oriented forest plans for their town forests. I think there's 6 different towns that have done that. You're familiar with that too. And also, like, the town of Rowe has used 2 or 3 of its grants to do education around forests and actually implementing a climate forest plan that actually has nothing to do with harvesting trees. They're monitoring hemlock woolly adelgid, they're inoculating ash trees, they're mapping the old growth that they have on their town forest. So, we kind of leave it to the towns to decide, how to interpret forest stewardship, as long as it's doing good stewardship. And any forest conservation easement, doesn't require forestry. You can have a forever wild easement. The state has funded plenty of them. It's up to the applicant what they want to do with the forests, as far as that's concerned.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. Anyone
I
new?
might
Okay.
just might add that in kind of my reviewing this summer of the draft as we have it, that we should have perhaps more of a mention of the Massachusetts Forest Action Plan, which has as their number 1 priority the appropriate management of our forest under an era of rapid climate change, that the protection of the forest resource under those circumstances is the top priority, the top goal. And then the second goal is to manage forests for ecosystem health and maintaining biodiversity. So those I think we could well benefit from having. I think Glenn's suggestion is a good one, of taking that chapter 3 and divide it and pull out the the climate focused things and maybe make that chapter 3 and have the rest of it be a chapter 4, so that it ascends in the order that people encounter it as that it comes in our plan. Because without dealing with these climate change issues, our forests are just going to degrade, regardless of whether we do anything or not. If we don't do anything, climate change is going to degrade the quality of our ecosystems that are out there.
Great. So I don't know if we want to ask any other questions, or we want to do a
Glenn
round.
has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Glenn.
Oh, sorry, Glenn has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Glenn.
yeah. One thing that I noticed while I was reading was that there was a reference to climate forestry or something. I don't think the term was defined, but I know that the existing best management practices that were written at least 10 years ago, I think, since they've been revised, they came out of UMass. They are so overdue for revision, and maybe this group can motivate a revision to the best management practices, because there are currently no best management practices that address carbon storage, sequestration, down course woody debris, you know, any of that. There are no best management practices that are related to climate. I think it might mention somewhere in that document carbon sequestration, but it's just a buzzword that's thrown in. So I think that that's something that would help the region, especially because there are a lot of working forests in this area. If there was specific best management practices that, like Dickon said, were based on science, you know, not based on, you know, a faith-based process, but based on the science that really shows that, yes, if you follow these best management practices, you'll be, you know, at least not severely degrading the carbon storage on your land and the future potential carbon capturing capacity of the forest. So I think that would be helpful for the region. That would be helpful for the entire state, but it's really a Western Mass, primarily a Western Mass thing, or Central and Western Mass. And somehow the folks at UMass need to be funded in order to make the, you know, changes, the revisions to the best management practices. And this could be some mechanism that you could pursue to get those brought up to, you know, at least this century, because they're really mostly based on the previous century's information. So thanks.
So I can just offer that there is a group of nonprofits that have been working on the climate resilience, you know, planning for forest stewardship, that has been looking at, you know, trying to make forestry practices being proactively thinking about climate change. And so the Nature Conservancy and Mass Audubon and NEF and others have been kind of working collaboratively on that effort with the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. So, you know, we've been trying to pilot some of those concepts in the stewardship plans that have been approved for some of the town forests. So there will be more coming out on that in the near future. There's a guide that's being worked on that kind of thing. So we can share that with you too when those are ready. Okay. So I didn't have anybody else join. We had some folks who weren't able to make it, I guess, but I don't want to take up people's time, but we're happy to listen if anyone else wants to make a comment or enter something into the chat. But Hank, did you have anything else you wanted to add at this point, or? You're muted, but
I just have to unmute myself.
Okay.
It's not that quick. Just to thank people for, you know, the comments and every comment, you know, we listen to, and we've been going around over the last 4 months or so with the draft and collecting feedback, and it's been really helpful. And so if people have further thoughts that they want to enter into the website, please do. There is a portal for making further comments, and we will read them, and where appropriate, incorporate them in what we hope is at least a starting point for looking at the next decade, and reflecting back on the evolution of the Woodlands Partnership. It has been through public back and forth and providing information and insights and opposing views that I think the partnership has really benefited. And, you know, we're at a point in which moving forward, we can do great things together.
Okay. Well, thanks everyone. I think we'll wrap it up at this point unless anyone else has anything to add. And just to let you know, thank you, Glenn. We have another listening session on September 14th, 7 p.m., another webinar before the board's meeting October 11th to vote on the plan. So we'll be trying to incorporate these changes and additional feedback that comes in, and hoping to make it stronger all the time. So we appreciate your feedback. All right, well, thanks everyone. We'll close it here.
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.